She was 9 months pregnant, sitting on a cold sidewalk, watching dozens of people walk past her like she was invisible. Her boyfriend never showed up. Her phone was dead. Her contractions were 3 minutes apart, and not a single person would stop to help. Until a stranger in a plain jacket pulled over and asked four simple words. How far apart? She had no idea that this stranger was a billionaire. She had no idea that her own sister had been planning to destroy her life for 5 years. And she had no idea that the man she loved, the father of her baby, was being paid to betray her. This is the story of a woman who lost everything: her daughter, her home, her reputation, her freedom. And this is how she fought back. Stay with me until the end, because what happens next will change the way you think about trust, family, and survival. Lesson and value statement. Before we begin, I want you to know something important. This story is more than entertainment. It is a reminder that the people who are supposed to love us can sometimes hurt us the most. It is proof that you can survive betrayal, false accusations, and public humiliation. And it is a lesson that your past does not define your future. If you have ever felt alone, abandoned, or invisible, this story is for you. If you have ever trusted the wrong person, this story is for you. If you have ever wondered whether you are strong enough to survive the worst day of your life, this story will show you that you are. The meaning of this story is simple. The truth is only a weapon when you are afraid of it. Once you stop hiding, once you own your story, no one can use it against you. This story will teach you 3 things you will never forget. First, betrayal does not define you. How you rise from it does. Second, the people who hurt you the most are often the ones you trusted the most. And that is not your fault. That is their choice. Third, and this is the most important one, you do not need to be rescued. You just need to stop waiting for permission to save yourself. If you have ever felt invisible, if you have ever been abandoned by someone who promised to stay, if you have ever wondered whether you are strong enough to survive what life has thrown at you, this story is your answer. Now, let us begin. They say God does not give you more than you can handle. Standing on that sidewalk, contractions ripping through my body like lightning strikes, watching person after person step around me like I was nothing more than a piece of garbage someone had carelessly discarded, I thought maybe God had confused me with someone stronger, someone braver, someone who had not already been broken so many times that she had lost count. My name is Lena Marshall. I am 32 years old, and this is the story of how I lost everything I thought I knew, discovered who I really was, and learned that sometimes the people who save you are not the ones wearing capes or riding white horses. Sometimes they are complete strangers who happen to be driving past at exactly the right moment. And sometimes the people who destroy you, who tear your life apart piece by piece with surgical precision, are the ones who are supposed to love you most. It started on a Tuesday afternoon in late September, the kind of perfect autumn day that makes you believe good things are possible. Golden leaves dancing in a gentle breeze, sunlight warm on your skin. The smell of someone somewhere burning leaves, that nostalgic scent that always reminded me of the brief, happy years before my parents died. I was 9 months pregnant, sitting on a wooden bench outside my obstetrician's office, waiting for Marcus, my boyfriend of 2 years, the father of my unborn daughter, the man who had looked me in the eyes 6 months ago and promised that everything was going to be different now, that he was going to be different, that we were going to be a real family. He was supposed to pick me up 2 hours ago. 2 hours, 120 minutes of watching other pregnant women waddle out of the office building, climb into waiting cars driven by attentive partners, and disappear into their happy little lives. 120 minutes of checking my phone obsessively, watching the battery drain from 30% to 15 to 5 to nothing. My phone died somewhere around the 90-minute mark. The charger was in Marcus's car. The car that was not here, that had never been here, that was probably parked outside some bar or casino or wherever Marcus went when he disappeared for hours without explanation. I had $3.47 in my pocket. Not enough for a cab, not enough for anything, really, and no way to call anyone because my phone was as dead as my faith in the man who was supposed to be here. The first contraction hit me like a freight train at exactly 4:17 in the afternoon. I know the time because I had just looked at the clock on the building across the street, wondering if I should try to walk to the bus stop 6 blocks away or just sit here until Marcus finally remembered he had a pregnant girlfriend. The pain started in my lower back, a dull ache that quickly sharpened into something that stole my breath. It wrapped around my entire midsection, squeezing, tightening, demanding attention. I gripped the edge of the bench so hard my knuckles turned white, breathing through it the way the prenatal classes had taught me. Okay, this is fine. Braxton Hicks. False labor. Practice contractions. This happened all the time in the final weeks of pregnancy. The books all said so. The doctors all said so. Nothing to worry about, just my body preparing for the real thing. I would be fine. I just needed to breathe. Just needed to wait it out. Just needed Marcus to show up. The second contraction came 4 minutes later. This one was worse, longer, more intense. A wave of pressure and pain that made me double over on the bench. One hand pressed against my enormous belly, the other gripping the wooden slats beneath me. A woman walking past glanced at me, frowned slightly, and kept walking. She was wearing expensive shoes, red bottoms. I remember thinking that those shoes probably cost more than 3 months of my rent. By the third contraction, I knew this was not false labor. This was not practice. This was the real thing, and it was happening right now, right here, on a sidewalk in downtown, with no phone, no ride, no money, and absolutely no one coming to help me. I managed to stand up, thinking maybe I could walk to the hospital. It was only 6 blocks away. I had walked 6 blocks 1,000 times before. I was young and healthy and strong. I could do this. I had survived worse things than a 6-block walk. I made it half a block before my legs gave out. The concrete was cold through my thin maternity dress. The pale blue one, with the little white flowers that Marcus had said, made me look pretty. I remember staring at people's shoes as they passed. Expensive heels clicking against the pavement, sneakers shuffling by without slowing, business shoes, running shoes, sandals, boots, dozens of pairs of feet, hundreds of steps, and not a single one stopping. I was not invisible. That would have been easier somehow. Invisible people do not exist. And if you do not exist, you cannot be ignored. No. I was something worse than invisible. I was inconvenient. I was a problem no one wanted to deal with. I was a pregnant woman sitting on a dirty sidewalk in obvious distress. And every single person who walked past me made a conscious choice to keep walking. A businessman in a gray suit actually stepped over my outstretched legs without breaking stride. Another contraction hit, 3 minutes this time, maybe less. The pain was building, each wave higher than the last, and I was starting to panic. Really, truly panic, in a way I had not allowed myself to feel since I was 8 years old and a police officer knocked on our door to tell me my parents were never coming home. I called out to a woman in a red jacket. Please, please, I need help. I am in labor. She pretended not to hear me, walked faster, disappeared around the corner without looking back. I reached toward a man with a briefcase, my hand trembling, my voice cracking. Please, I need to get to a hospital. He stepped around my outstretched hand like I was a piece of trash in his path, a minor obstacle between him and wherever he was going. The tears came then, not dramatic sobbing, not the kind of crying you see in movies where the actress somehow manages to look beautiful, even in her darkest moment. Just quiet tears rolling down my face, mixing with the sweat that had started to bead on my forehead. I sat on that cold, dirty sidewalk, one hand on my belly, where my daughter was fighting to come into the world, the other pressed flat against the concrete, and I wondered if this was it, if this was how my baby was going to be born. On a dirty sidewalk surrounded by people who could not be bothered to help, surrounded by expensive shoes and averted eyes, and the particular cruelty of indifference. That is when I heard his voice. How far apart? I looked up, squinting against the late afternoon sun. A man was crouching in front of me, his face partially silhouetted by the light behind him. Jeans, a plain gray jacket that looked like it had seen better days. Brown hair that needed a cut, slightly messy, like he had been running his hands through it. Eyes that looked tired but kind, with the sort of deep-set shadows that suggested he had not been sleeping well. What? My voice came out as a croak, rough from crying, rough from the contractions that were stealing more of my breath with each passing minute. The contractions, he said, his voice calm and steady, like we were having a perfectly normal conversation and not crouching on a dirty sidewalk while I went into labor. How far apart are they? 3 minutes, maybe 4. I do not know anymore. I lost track. He nodded once, a quick, decisive movement that somehow made me feel like everything was going to be okay. Like this stranger who had appeared out of nowhere knew exactly what to do. Can you walk if I help you? I do not know. I tried. I fell. That is okay. We will figure it out. My car is right there. He pointed to a Honda Accord parked at the curb about 20 feet away. Nothing fancy, a little dirty, a perfectly ordinary car that looked like salvation to me in that moment. He helped me to my feet, one arm wrapped securely around my waist, taking most of my weight like I weighed nothing at all. He was stronger than he looked, this stranger in his plain jacket. Steady, solid, the kind of presence that made you feel anchored when everything else was spinning out of control. What is your name, Muscle? He asked as we shuffled toward his car. Lena Marshall. Nice to meet you, Lena. I wish it were under better circumstances. You and me both. Another contraction started building, and I grabbed his arm with my free hand, squeezing hard enough to leave bruises. He did not flinch, did not pull away, just kept moving us forward, one slow step at a time, talking to me in that calm, steady voice. Breathe through it, in through your nose, out through your mouth. You are doing great. Just a few more steps. He opened the passenger door and helped me in, buckling my seatbelt with quick, efficient movements. I noticed his hands then. Strong hands, clean nails, a simple watch on his left wrist. Nothing expensive, nothing flashy, no wedding ring. He got in the driver's seat and started the car. I am taking you to St. Mary's. It is the closest hospital with a good labor and delivery unit. Is that okay? I nodded, unable to speak, as another wave of pain crested and broke. Good. We will be there in about 10 minutes, maybe less if traffic cooperates. He pulled out into traffic, and I realized something that almost made me laugh despite everything. He drove like a grandmother on sedatives, careful, cautious, using his turn signal at every single intersection, coming to complete stops at stop signs, yielding to pedestrians with patient courtesy. I wanted to scream at him that I was in labor, that every second counted, that this was literally life and death. But another contraction hit, and all I could do was squeeze his armrest so hard I left nail marks in the leather. He glanced at the damage I was doing to his car's interior and said, completely deadpan, I was going to sell this car anyway. I laughed. God help me, in the middle of labor. On the way to the hospital with a complete stranger, I laughed. It hurt. Everything hurt. But laughter felt better than crying. I am sorry about your armrest. I managed between breaths. Do not be. It needed character anyway, too pristine. People were starting to think I did not actually use my car. Do you always make jokes when strangers go into labor in your passenger seat? I do not know. This is the first time it has happened. I am improvising. Despite everything, I smiled. There was something about him, something calming and real and oddly comforting. He was not pretending this was not terrifying. He was not feeding me empty platitudes about how everything would be fine. He was just here, present, doing what needed to be done with a kind of quiet competence that felt more reassuring than any amount of false optimism. Thank you, I said, for stopping. No one else would stop. He was quiet for a moment, his eyes on the road, his hands steady on the wheel. When he spoke, his voice was softer. I know what it feels like to need help and have no one there. I would not wish that on anyone. There was something in his tone, something heavy and old and sad, that made me want to ask more. But another contraction hit, and then we were pulling up to the emergency entrance of St. Mary's Hospital, and suddenly everything was chaos. He jumped out and flagged down a nurse, pushing an empty wheelchair. I heard him explaining the situation, his voice calm and clear, giving them information I did not even remember telling him. She is about 3 minutes apart, started about an hour ago on the sidewalk downtown. No complications that I know of. She needs to be seen immediately. The nurse nodded and helped me into the wheelchair. I was being whisked away, through automatic doors, into the bright fluorescent lights of the hospital, leaving the stranger behind. I turned back, craning my neck to see him standing by his battered Honda, watching me go. Wait, I called out. I do not even know your name. He smiled, that same tired kind smile that made the corners of his eyes crinkle. Just focus on having a healthy baby. Here. He stepped forward quickly and pressed something into my hand. A business card, plain white, slightly bent at the corners. In case you need anything, really, anything at all. And then the doors closed between us, and he was gone. I looked at the card in my hand. Just a phone number, 10 digits, no name, no company, no title. Just a phone number that would change my life forever. 6 hours later, at exactly 11:43 at night, my daughter was born. 7 pounds, 4 ounces. 19 inches long, 10 perfect fingers, 10 perfect toes. A head full of dark hair that stuck up in every direction. The most beautiful thing I had ever seen in my entire life. I named her Grace, because grace is what you receive when you do not deserve it. And this baby, this perfect tiny person who fit so naturally in my arms, felt like the first truly good thing that had happened to me in years. Marcus showed up 3 hours after she was born. He walked into my hospital room at nearly 3 in the morning, smelling like alcohol and cigarette smoke, and some perfume that was not mine. He was wearing the same clothes he had been wearing when he left that morning, wrinkled and disheveled, and he did not even look at me before his eyes found the bassinet. So that is her, huh? That is her. Not she is beautiful. Not I am sorry I missed it. Not are you okay? Did everything go all right? I was so worried. Just that is her. Like he was identifying a package that had been delivered while he was out. Her name is Grace, I said, watching his face for something, anything that looked like love, like wonder. Like the overwhelming emotion I had felt when they first placed her in my arms. Cool. He was already scrolling through his phone. Grace is good. Traditional. Where were you? What? I said, Where were you? You were supposed to pick me up at 2. I waited for over 2 hours. My phone died. I went into labor on the sidewalk, Marcus. On the sidewalk. A stranger had to drive me to the hospital. He finally looked up from his phone, and I saw something flicker across his face. Not guilt, which was what I expected. Something else. Something colder. Traffic was crazy. I got stuck. For 5 hours? You were stuck in traffic for 5 hours? I do not know what you want me to say, Lena. I am here now, aren't I? I came as soon as I could. I wanted to scream at him. I wanted to throw something. I wanted to demand explanations and apologies and the truth. But Grace chose that moment to stir in her bassinet, making soft, little sounds that instantly pulled my attention away from everything else. Who drove you? Marcus asked as I lifted Grace into my arms. The stranger. What did he look like? Something about the question bothered me. Not what happened, not are you okay, but what did he look like? Like that was the important part. I do not know. Brown hair, average height, drove a Honda. Why does it matter? It does not. But his jaw was tight, and he would not meet my eyes. I just do not like the idea of some random guy picking up my pregnant girlfriend. Could have been anyone. Could have been dangerous. He was not dangerous. He was kind. He stopped when no one else would, when you were not there. The words came out sharper than I intended, and I saw Marcus's face harden. Fine. Whatever. I am going to find a vending machine. You want anything? He left before I waited for my answer. I listened to his footsteps fade down the hallway, and I held my daughter against my chest, and I wondered when the man I loved had become this stranger who could not even pretend to care. Later, after Marcus had left, to go home and get some sleep, I looked at the business card again. 10 digits. No name. Just a phone number and a quiet offer of help. I typed the number into my phone, then deleted it. Typed it again, deleted it again. Some questions, I told myself, are better left unanswered. I had no idea how wrong I was. The hospital kept us for 2 days. Standard procedure for a first-time mother, with no complications, they said. Time to make sure the baby was feeding properly, to check for any issues that might not show up right away, to give me a chance to rest and recover. Rest. That was almost funny. Every 2 hours, Grace woke up hungry. Every 2 hours, a nurse came to check my vitals, ask me questions, write things on a chart. Every 2 hours, I was reminded that sleep was a luxury new mothers could not afford. Marcus visited once, the day after Grace was born. He brought flowers, grocery store carnations still wrapped in plastic, and a teddy bear that was clearly purchased from the hospital gift shop. He held Grace for approximately 3 minutes before handing her back, claiming she was too fragile, and he was afraid he would break her. I will set up the nursery while you are here, he promised as he left. Have everything ready when you come home. I wanted to believe him. I wanted so badly to believe that he was just nervous about the baby, that he was processing fatherhood in his own way, that everything would be different once we were home as a family. But there was a voice in the back of my head, the voice of the girl who had survived foster care and learned not to trust promises. That voice whispered that Marcus had never finished anything he started in the 2 years I had known him. That voice reminded me of all the times he had promised to do something and simply never gotten around to it. I told that voice to be quiet. I told myself that people could change, that having a baby changed people, that this time would be different. Marcus picked us up from the hospital on Thursday afternoon. He arrived in his Dodge Charger, the black one, with the chrome rims that he spent more time washing and waxing than he ever spent talking to me. The car seat we had bought 3 months ago was still in the box, stuffed in the trunk. I did not have time to install it, he said when I stared at him. I have been busy getting the apartment ready. I installed the car seat myself in the hospital parking lot. while Grace fussed in her carrier and Marcus leaned against his precious car, scrolling through his phone. A kind nurse noticed me struggling and came out to help. I thanked her and tried not to cry. The drive home was silent except for Grace's occasional whimpers and the too loud bass of whatever music Marcus was playing. I sat in the back seat next to my daughter, watching her face, marveling at how perfect she was, and trying not to think about everything that felt wrong. Our apartment was exactly how I had left it 3 days ago, which meant it was exactly how Marcus had left it, which meant it was a disaster. Dishes piled in the sink, crusted with food that had been sitting there for days, dirty laundry scattered across the bedroom floor, empty beer bottles lined up on the coffee table like soldiers standing at attention. The air smelled stale and sour, the smell of a place that had been closed up and neglected. The nursery was worse. Marcus had promised to paint it. 3 months ago, I had picked out the perfect pale yellow, bought the paint and brushes and rollers, stacked everything neatly in the corner of the room. The paint cans were still there, unopened, gathering dust. The walls were still the dingy beige they had been since we moved in. The crib was still in the box. The changing table was in pieces, the Allen wrench still in its plastic packaging. There was literally an exercise bike in the corner of the room, the one Marcus had insisted on buying a year ago and had used exactly twice. That bike had better abs than both of us combined. "You said you were going to set this up," I said quietly, Grace asleep in her car seat at my feet. Marcus had the decency to look slightly embarrassed. "I was going to. Things came up. Work has been crazy. Work." Marcus worked at a car dealership, selling overpriced vehicles to people who could not afford them. His hours were flexible, his responsibilities minimal. Things coming up usually meant drinks with his buddies or long afternoons at the casino he thought I did not know about. "It is fine," I said, because what else could I say? "I will figure it out." I set up the crib myself that night, one-handed, while Grace slept in her car seat nearby. It took me 2 hours. My stitches pulled with every movement. My body ached in places I did not know could ache. But I got it done, because that is what mothers do. We get things done. Marcus was in the living room the whole time watching football, the volume turned up loud enough that he could pretend not to hear me struggling. The first night home was a nightmare. Grace woke up every 90 minutes, hungry and wet and convinced that the world was ending. I fed her, changed her, rocked her back to sleep, and then lay there, in the darkness, too exhausted to sleep, waiting for her to wake up again. Marcus slept through all of it. Every cry, every whimper, every desperate 2 a.m. feeding. He had moved to the couch, claiming the baby kept him awake, but I knew the truth. He just did not want to deal with her. When I finally collapsed back into bed at 5 in the morning, running on maybe 2 hours of broken sleep total, Marcus rolled over and mumbled something that made my blood run cold. "Can you keep her quieter next time? Some of us have to work tomorrow." I did not answer. I was too tired to fight, too tired to point out that I had also worked until 2 weeks before my due date, that I had been the one paying most of the bills for months, that I was running on no sleep and a body that felt like it had been hit by a truck. I just closed my eyes and prayed for unconsciousness. The second night was marginally better. Grace only woke up 4 times. I was starting to learn her rhythms, starting to understand what each different cry meant. Hungry cry, wet cry, just lonely and wanting to be held cry. Around 2 in the morning, I got up to get a glass of water. The apartment was dark, and I moved quietly, not wanting to wake anyone. Not that there was much chance of waking Marcus, who could sleep through a hurricane. That is when I heard his voice, coming from behind the closed bathroom door. "I need more time." His tone was urgent, pleading in a way I had never heard before. I know I said that already, but things are complicated right now. She just had the baby, and everything is crazy. Silence. He was on the phone with someone. I will get it. I told you I would get it, and I will. Just give me a couple more weeks. I am good for it. My heart was pounding. I pressed myself against the wall next to the bathroom door, holding my breath. Look, do not do anything stupid, okay? I said I would handle it, and I will. Just, yeah, yeah, I understand. 2 weeks. Fine. I heard the click of the phone being hung up, and I quickly retreated to the bedroom, sliding under the covers and pretending to be asleep. A moment later, Marcus came out of the bathroom and climbed onto the couch without even checking on me or Grace. I lay there in the darkness, my mind racing. Who had he been talking to? What did he need more time for? What exactly did he owe, and to whom? The next morning, I tried to ask him about it. Marcus, who were you talking to last night, on the phone in the bathroom? He barely looked up from his cereal. Nobody, just work? At 2 in the morning? Time zones. It was someone from the corporate office on the East Coast. The car dealership has a corporate office that calls at 2 a.m. Something shifted in his face then. Something cold and hard that I had only seen glimpses of before. Mind your own business, Lena. The words hit me like a slap. I stepped back, physically recoiling from the venom in his voice. I was just asking. You are my boyfriend. I am allowed to ask. And I said it was nothing. Are you going to trust me, or are you going to keep interrogating me like I am some kind of criminal? I wanted to push harder. I wanted to demand answers, to keep asking until he told me the truth. But Grace started crying in the next room, and by the time I had fed her and changed her and gotten her settled, Marcus had already left for work, or wherever he actually went during the day. That afternoon, while Grace napped in her crib and I finally had a moment to sit down, I scrolled through the news on my phone, just mindlessly browsing, looking for something to distract me from the exhaustion and the worry and the growing certainty that something in my life was very, very wrong. One headline made me stop breathing. Tech billionaire Ethan Cole returns to public eye after months of seclusion. There was a photo accompanying the article. Brown hair, slightly messy, tired kind eyes with deep shadows beneath them. A face I recognized instantly, even though I had only seen it once before on a sidewalk downtown while I went into labor. The stranger who had driven me to the hospital was a billionaire. I read the article 3 times, trying to make it make sense. Ethan Cole, 38, CEO, and founder of Cole Therapeutics, a pharmaceutical company worth over $12 billion. He had built the company from nothing, starting in his garage right out of college, developing treatments for rare childhood diseases. The article called him a visionary, a humanitarian, one of the most eligible bachelors in the country. But that was not what caught my attention. What made me read and reread was a single paragraph buried halfway through the article. Cole has largely avoided public appearances since the death of his wife, Margaret, 3 years ago. Margaret Cole died from complications during childbirth. The baby, a boy, did not survive either. Friends say Cole has never fully recovered from the tragedy. I sat there in my nursing chair, my sleeping daughter in my arms, and something clicked into place with an almost audible sound. That was why he had stopped. That was why he had known exactly what to do, how to stay calm, what questions to ask. He had been there before. In a hospital, waiting for a baby that never came home. He could not save his wife. He could not save his son. But when he saw me on that sidewalk, maybe he thought he could save us. I looked at the business card again. It was sitting on my nightstand, slightly crumpled now from being handled so many times. 10 digits that belonged to a billionaire, A billionaire who drove a Honda Accord and stopped for strangers and did not even tell them his name. I wanted to call him, to thank him properly, to tell him that his kindness had meant something, that it had probably saved my life and my daughter's life, that I would never forget what he had done. But before I could decide anything, my phone exploded with notifications. Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, all of them going off at once. That familiar cascade of sounds that usually meant something bad had happened. Rachel. My sister Rachel had posted something on social media. I opened Instagram with shaking hands. Rachel's post was at the top of my feed, her perfectly curated life on display as always. Beautiful house, handsome husband, expensive clothes and vacations, and a smile that looked camera-ready, even in candid shots. The caption read, "Some people will do anything for attention, using pregnancy, making up emergencies, anything to be the center of the drama. Sad to watch someone you used to love become so desperate. No names, no tags, nothing specific enough to be called out directly. But everyone who knew us, everyone who followed both of our accounts, would know exactly who she was talking about." The comments were already piling up. Friends of Rachel's, most of whom I had never met, weighing in with their opinions. So true. Some people just thrive on chaos. I know exactly who you are talking about. So pathetic. Sending you love. You deserve better family than that. And then, the worst ones. The ones from strangers who did not know me at all, who had simply stumbled onto the post and decided to join in. People who fake emergencies for attention are the worst. Probably was not even really pregnant, lol. This is why you cannot trust anyone these days. I was sitting there, stitches still healing, nipples cracked and bleeding from learning to breastfeed, exhausted beyond words, holding my newborn daughter, who was very real and very much not imaginary, and strangers on the internet were calling me a liar. Marcus came out of the bedroom, drawn by the sound of my crying. He glanced at my phone screen, at Rachel's post, at the comments piling up, and he smirked. "What?" I demanded through my tears. "What is funny about this?" "Nothing. Just, you know how Rachel is. She has always been dramatic. She is my sister. She is supposed to be on my side. She is supposed to support me. I just had a baby, Marcus, her niece, and she is posting things like this? Is she wrong, though?" The question hung in the air between us, sharp and ugly. What is that supposed to mean? "I am just saying, Lena. You do tend to make everything about yourself. Maybe she has a point." He walked away before I could respond, before I could point out that I had nearly given birth alone on a sidewalk because he could not be bothered to pick me up, before I could remind him that nothing about the last 3 days had been about me, that I had been completely focused on our daughter while he slept through feedings and complained about the noise. That night, I lay awake for hours, Grace sleeping peacefully in the crib beside me. I thought about Rachel, who I had taught to braid hair when we were teenagers, who I had held during nightmares in those awful foster homes before the Carters found us, who had been my sister in every way that mattered, even though we did not share blood. When had it all gone wrong? I tried to trace it back. The distance between us had been growing for years, but I could not pinpoint when it started. After I aged out of the system and moved away for college, when I started dating Marcus, who Rachel had actually introduced me to at one of her parties. When I got pregnant and suddenly had something that Rachel, despite her perfect life, had not yet achieved, I did not know. I could not figure it out. And maybe that was the worst part. Rachel had become a stranger somewhere along the way, and I had not even noticed until it was too late. I fell asleep without an answer. In my dreams, I was back on that sidewalk, reaching out to people who would not stop, waiting for someone to see me. But in the dream, no one came. 3 weeks after Grace was born, I discovered that money was missing from our bank account. I found out by accident. I was trying to order diapers online, the cheap, generic brand that was all we could afford, when my debit card was declined. At first, I thought it was a mistake, a glitch in the system, some kind of technical error. Then I logged into our joint checking account and saw the truth. $3,000 was gone. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding, clicking through the transaction history with shaking hands. Withdrawal, $500, ATM. Withdrawal, $800, ATM. Withdrawal, $1,000, ATM. Again and again, all cash, all from different ATMs around the city. Marcus had been draining our account for weeks. I confronted him that night, after Grace was asleep, my voice carefully controlled, even though I wanted to scream. Can you explain to me why $3,000 is missing from our account? He did not even look up from his phone. Car repairs. The charger needed work. $3,000 worth of car repairs? You do not know anything about cars, Lena. Transmission work is expensive. Our rent is due in a week. The electricity bill is past due. We do not have enough formula for the baby. And you spent $3,000 on your car without even telling me? He finally looked up, and something in his eyes made me take a step back, something cold and calculating that I had never seen before, or maybe had never allowed myself to see. I said it was car repairs. Drop it. No, I am not going to drop it. This is our money, Marcus. Both of ours. You cannot just take thousands of dollars without discussing it with me. Actually, I can. My name is on that account too. I can do whatever I want. We have a baby. We have responsibilities. We cannot just... I said, drop it. He stood up from the couch, and suddenly he was in my space, close enough that I could smell the beer on his breath. You are always nagging me, always complaining, always making me feel like I am not good enough. Maybe if you were not such a pain to live with, I would actually want to come home. The words hit me like physical blows. I stepped back, bumping into the wall, my hands trembling. Marcus, I am just trying to understand. There is nothing to understand. I spent the money. It is done. Now stop interrogating me and go take care of the baby or something. She's probably crying anyway. He pushed past me and walked out of the apartment, the door slamming behind him. I stood there in the empty living room, shaking, trying to process what had just happened. Grace started crying in the bedroom. I went to her automatically, picking her up, holding her against my chest, rocking her gently, while tears rolled down my own face. I wanted to believe there was an innocent explanation. Car repairs, unexpected expenses, something normal and reasonable that my overtired brain was blowing out of proportion. I wanted to believe that the man I loved, the father of my daughter, was not the monster I was starting to suspect he might be. But that night, after Grace finally fell asleep, I did something I had never done before. I went through Marcus's things. His hiding spot was predictable. A shoebox in the back of his closet, tucked behind old sneakers and a winter jacket he never wore. Inside, I found the truth. Gambling receipts, dozens of them, casino chips from 3 different establishments, IOU, slips scrawled on napkins and scraps of paper, and a single folded note that made my blood run cold. Final warning, you have until the end of the month. $40,000. Do not make us come find you. $40,000. Marcus owed someone $40,000. I sank down onto the closet floor, the note clutched in my shaking hands, and finally allowed myself to see the truth. The late-night phone calls, the money disappearing from our account, the secretive behavior, the anger, the way he had been pulling away from me and Grace ever since we came home from the hospital. He was in trouble, deep trouble, the kind of trouble that did not go away on its own, and somehow I knew with a certainty I could not explain that I was part of his plan to get out of it. The next morning, there was a knock at our door. I was not expecting anyone. I had been up since 5 with Grace, had barely managed to get her settled in her swing, and was still in my robe with my hair unwashed and dark circles under my eyes. The knock made me jump, my heart racing, half expecting debt collectors or whoever Marcus owed money to. Instead, I opened this door to find Ethan Cole. He looked different than he had at the hospital, more rested, though those shadows still lingered under his eyes. He was wearing jeans and a button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled up to his elbows. Casual, normal, like he was just any guy and not a billionaire who owned a pharmaceutical empire. In his hands were 2 large shopping bags. "Hi," he said, suddenly looking unsure of himself. "I hope it is okay that I came by. I wanted to check that you made it home okay, and I thought the baby probably needs things, so I brought some things, diapers, wipes, some clothes. I did not know what size, so I got a few different options. The woman at the store helped me pick them out." I stared at him, this billionaire, standing in my shabby apartment hallway, shifting his weight from foot to foot like a nervous teenager. "How did you know where I live?" "Hospital records. I know someone who works in administration." I probably should not have looked, but I was worried. "You seemed, I do not know, like you might need help." I should have been alarmed. I should have been concerned that a stranger, even a kind one, had tracked down my home address, but all I felt was a warm rush of something that might have been relief. Someone had noticed. Someone cared enough to check. "Do you want to come in?" I heard myself ask. "The apartment is a mess, but I have coffee. Probably. I do not want to impose." "You drove me to the hospital when I was in labor on a sidewalk. I think we are past imposing." He smiled, that same tired kind smile I remembered, and stepped inside. I apologized for the mess as I led him to the kitchen, moving dirty dishes off the counter, kicking Marcus's empty beer bottles out of the path. The apartment looked even worse through a stranger's eyes, especially a stranger who probably lived in a mansion somewhere. "Coffee?" I asked, reaching for the pot. "Please, just black." I poured 2 cups, grateful for something to do with my hands. Grace gurgled from her swing in the living room, and Ethan's eyes went to her immediately. "That is her? The baby?" "That is her. Grace. She is beautiful. Congratulations." "Thank you for everything, for stopping, for getting me to the hospital. I never got to properly thank you." "You do not need to thank me. I am just glad you are both okay." Still, most people would not have stopped. Most people did not stop. Something passed across his face, a shadow of old pain. I know what it is like to need help when no one is there. I would not wish that on anyone. We were quiet for a moment, sipping our coffee. I wanted to ask him about his wife, about the baby they lost, but it felt too invasive, too personal. He would tell me if he wanted to. "You know who I am?" he said finally. It was not a question. "I looked you up, after. I wanted to know who had helped me." "And you did not immediately try to contact me for money or favors. That is unusual. Is that what usually happens?" "More often than you might think. People find out I have money, and suddenly they have a million reasons to need my help." "I do not want your money." I said it firmly, meaning it. "You already helped me more than you know. I would never ask for anything more." He studied me for a long moment, his eyes searching my face for something. Whatever he was looking for, he seemed to find it. "You are different," he said quietly. "Most people." He trailed off as the front door opened. Marcus walked in, stopping dead when he saw Ethan sitting at our kitchen table. The silence stretched between them, thick with tension I did not understand. "Who the hell is this?" Marcus demanded. "This is the man who drove me to the hospital," I said, setting down my coffee cup. "When you did not show up." Marcus's face went dark. "So you just let strangers into our home now?" Ethan stood up smoothly, his movements calm and unthreatening. "I am not here to cause problems. I just wanted to make sure Lena and the baby were okay. We do not need your charity." "It is not charity, it is basic human kindness. We do not need that either." Marcus stepped closer, trying to use his height to intimidate. Ethan did not flinch. "Get out of my apartment." "Marcus!" I stepped between them. "He was just being nice. He brought things for Grace." "I do not care what he brought. We do not accept handouts from strangers." Ethan held up his hands, backing toward the door. "I did not mean to cause any tension. I will go." "Yeah, you do that." At the door, Ethan paused. His eyes met mine over Marcus's shoulder, and there was something there, some understanding that passed between us without words. "If you ever need anything," he said quietly, pitched so only I could hear, "I mean it. Anything at all." He pressed another card into my hand, the same plain white card, the same phone number, and then he was gone. Marcus slammed the door behind him so hard the walls shook. "What the hell was that about, Lena?" He was being kind, unlike some people. "What is that supposed to mean?" "It means you were supposed to pick me up. You were supposed to be there when I went into labor." "I was alone on a sidewalk, Marcus. On a sidewalk. If that man had not stopped, I do not know what would have happened." "And now he shows up here with gifts? Do you think I am stupid? Men do not just do nice things for women without wanting something in return." "Maybe some men do. Maybe some men are actually decent human beings who help people because it is the right thing to do." "You are so naive." He laughed. An ugly sound without humor. "Wake up, Lena. That guy wants something from you. They always do." He grabbed his keys from the counter and headed for the door. "Where are you going? Out?" "Unlike you, I have things to do." The door slammed again. I heard his car start in the parking lot, heard him peel out with a screech of tires, and then there was only silence. I stood in the kitchen for a long time, Ethan's card clutched in my hand, thinking about the two men who had just been in this apartment. One who showed up with gifts and kindness and asked for nothing. One who had not shown up when I needed him most, and then had the audacity to be angry about it. The contrast was stark, painful, impossible to ignore. That night, after Grace was asleep, I heard Marcus on the phone again. This time, but I crept closer to the door, close enough to hear more than fragments. "I told you. I am working on it. Yes, I met him. He showed up today. No, she does not know anything." A pause, then a voice I recognized, a female voice, Rachel. "Do not worry," Marcus said. "I will get what we need from her. She trusts me. She has no idea." I pressed my hand over my mouth to keep from gasping. "Just give me a little more time. Once I figure out his angle, we can move forward with the plan." The plan? What plan? What were they talking about? What was Marcus supposed to get from me? I retreated to the bedroom before he could catch me listening, my mind racing with questions that had no answers. Marcus and Rachel, working together, plotting something, using me for something I did not understand. I lay awake until dawn, holding my sleeping daughter, listening to every sound in the apartment, wondering how my life had become this, wondering how long I had been sleeping next to the enemy. The pounding on the door came at exactly 7:14 in the morning. I know the time because I had just looked at the clock, thinking that Grace had actually slept for 4 straight hours, and maybe, just maybe, things were starting to get easier. I was wrong. Things were about to get so much worse. The pounding continued, aggressive and insistent. Then a voice, official sounding, the kind of voice that expects to be obeyed. Child Protective Services. Open the door immediately. My blood went cold. For a moment, I could not move, could not think, could not process the words that were still echoing in my head. Child Protective Services, CPS. The organization that took children away from their parents. The organization that had haunted my nightmares since I was 8 years old, when they had come to my school to tell me my parents were dead and I was now a ward of the state. Ms. Marshall, we have a court order. Open the door now, please. I stumbled out of the bed, still in my sleep shirt and shorts, my hair tangled, my eyes gritty from too little sleep. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely work the lock. I opened the door to find 4 people standing in the hallway, 2 women in professional blazers carrying clipboards, 2 police officers in full uniform, hands resting on their belts. Lena Marshall? The woman in front held up an official-looking badge. Yes, what is this about? What is happening? I am Janelle Brooks with Child Protective Services. We have received a credible report of child neglect and are here to conduct an emergency welfare check on the minor child residing at this address. Neglect? The word came out strangled, high-pitched, with panic. There is no neglect. My daughter is fine. She is sleeping right now. She is perfectly safe and healthy and cared for. We need to see her. Ma'am? Yes, of course. Come in. They pushed past me into the apartment, all 4 of them, spreading out like they were conducting a military operation. One of the police officers stayed by the door, blocking my exit. The other followed the CPS workers as they moved through the space. I watched in horror as they took in the apartment. The dishes in the sink that I had not had time to wash. The laundry basket, overflowing with clothes I had not had time to fold. Grace's toys scattered across the living room floor. The general chaos of a home occupied by a new mother with no help and no sleep. One of the officers started taking photographs. "What are you doing?" I demanded, following him into the kitchen. "You cannot just photograph my home without permission." "We have a court order, ma'am." Janelle Brooks handed me a document, but my hands were shaking so badly I could barely read it. Based on the evidence provided to the court, a judge has authorized emergency removal of the minor child pending a full investigation. Evidence? What evidence? I have not done anything wrong. My daughter is fine. She is healthy and fed and loved. You have no right? Ma'am, I need you to calm down. Calm down? You are threatening to take my baby and you want me to calm down? Janelle Brooks has pulled a folder from her bag and opened it. Inside were photographs. My apartment, but not my apartment. The same layout, the same furniture, but wrong. Garbage overflowing everywhere. Mold creeping up the walls. A baby bottle sitting on the counter with something dark and curdled inside. Broken glass on the floor near a baby's toy. These photos were provided as part of the report, she said. As you can see, they document conditions that present an immediate danger to the child's welfare. These are not my apartment. My voice was rising, edging toward hysteria. I mean, they look like my apartment, but they are not. Someone doctored these. Someone staged this. There has never been mold on my walls. I would never leave broken glass on the floor. This is not real. Ma'am, these photos were verified by the reporting party and accepted by the court as evidence. Who? Who reported this? Who would do this? Janelle checked her paperwork. The report was filed by a family member, Rachel Carter Hayes. Rachel. The world tilted on its axis. I reached out to grab the counter, to steady myself against the wave of dizziness that crashed over me. My own sister. My sister had called CPS on me. My sister had provided fake photographs to have my baby taken away. There must be some mistake, I heard myself saying. Rachel would not. She is my sister. She would never. The report also includes testimony regarding your mental state. Janelle's voice was professionally neutral, but I could see the judgment in her eyes. The reporting party expressed concern about postpartum instability, possible depression, and an inability to care for an infant. That is not true. None of that is true. I am tired, yes, because I have a newborn, but I am not unstable. I am not depressed. I am taking care of my daughter. We will need to verify that. In the meantime, no. I stepped back, shaking my head. No, you cannot take her. I know my rights. I was a paralegal. You cannot remove a child without evidence of imminent danger, and there is no danger here. These photos are fake. Someone manufactured them. The court has already reviewed the evidence and issued the order. You can contest the removal at the hearing scheduled for next week. Next week? You want to take my daughter for a week based on photographs that were obviously fabricated? I understand this is difficult, Ms. Marshall, but right now, I need you to bring me the child. Her name is Grace. My voice broke. Her name is Grace, and she is my daughter, and I have not done anything wrong. Janelle's expression softened slightly, but her voice remained firm. Please bring me Grace. The next few minutes happened in a horrible slow-motion blur. I walked to the bedroom, where Grace was just starting to stir in her crib. I picked her up, held her against my chest, felt her warm little body against mine. It is okay, I whispered to her. Mommy is here. Everything is going to be okay. But I knew it was not okay. I knew, with a terrible certainty, that nothing was ever going to be okay again. They did not rip her from my arms. That would have been easier, somehow. Easier to fight against, easier to rage at. Instead, they stood there, these four strangers in their professional clothes and their official badges, and they waited. Please, Miss Marshall, Janelle said. Do not make this harder than it needs to be. Marcus appeared in the bedroom doorway. I had almost forgotten he was there. He must have been hiding, avoiding the confrontation, and now he emerged, looking sleep-rumpled and confused. What is going on? They are trying to take Grace, I said. CPS. Rachel filed a report. They have fake photographs, and they are trying to take her. I expected him to be outraged, to demand explanations, to stand beside me and fight. Instead, he nodded slowly, his face settling into an expression of concern that looked rehearsed. I was afraid something like this might happen, he said, and he was not talking to me. He was talking to the CPS workers. She has been struggling since the baby was born. I have been worried about her mental state. She does not sleep. She cries all the time. She has these episodes. I stared at him, the father of my child, the man who was supposed to love me. Marcus, what are you doing? I am trying to help you, Lena. You need help. You are not well. I am fine. I am tired because you do not help with anything, but I am fine. See what I mean? He turned to Janelle. She gets defensive like this, paranoid. I did not want to say anything, but maybe this is for the best. Until she gets some professional help. You are lying. My voice was shaking now, tears streaming down my face. You are lying. Tell them you are lying. Tell them I am a good mother. But Marcus just shook his head sadly, playing his part perfectly. I think it would be better for everyone if Grace went somewhere safe for a little while, just until Lena gets the help she needs. The CPS workers exchanged glances. I could see them making up their minds, see them deciding that I was exactly what Rachel's report and Marcus's testimony said I was, an unstable woman, an unfit mother. Ms. Marshall, Janelle's voice was gentle now, the way you might talk to a frightened animal. I need you to hand me the baby. No. If you refuse to comply, I will have the officers remove her. No. Please. She needs me. I am her mother. I understand this is difficult, but the court has made its decision. You can fight it at the hearing next week. For now, Grace needs to go with us. I looked at the police officers, at their hands on their belts, ready to use force if necessary. I looked at Marcus, who was watching with an expression of fake concern that made me want to scream. I looked at Grace, who was starting to fuss in my arms, picking up on my distress. And I realized I had no choice. If I fought them, they would take her anyway. They would add resisting an officer to my list of supposed crimes. They would use my resistance as evidence that I was exactly as unstable as Rachel had claimed. If I wanted any chance of getting her back, I had to let her go. So I did the hardest thing I have ever done in my life. I kissed my daughter's forehead. I whispered that I loved her, that I would come for her, that this was not goodbye. And then I placed her in Janelle Brooks' arms and felt something inside me snap. Not break. Snap. Like a rubber band stretched too far. Grace started crying immediately. That newborn wail that I had learned to recognize, that I could pick out of a crowd, that cut through me like a knife. It is okay, Janelle said, adjusting her grip on my daughter. She will be well cared for. Where are you taking her? To an emergency foster placement. You will receive the address once everything is processed. They walked toward the door. Grace was screaming now, her little face red, her tiny fists waving. I could hear her all the way down the hallway, into the elevator, until finally the doors closed and there was only silence. I turned to Marcus. He was looking at his phone. You did this, I said, my voice barely recognizable. You and Rachel. This was planned. You are paranoid, Lena. You need help. Maybe this will be good for you. Give you time to rest. Get your head straight. Get out. This is my apartment, too. Get out, or I swear to God, Marcus, I will call the police and tell them everything. The gambling debts, the money you stole from our account, the phone calls with Rachel. All of it. Something flickered in his eyes, fear, maybe, or calculation. Fine, I was going to leave anyway. This place depresses me. He grabbed his keys and his wallet and walked out without another word. I stood in the empty apartment, in the nursery I had set up myself, surrounded by baby clothes and toys, and the smell of Grace's baby lotion, and I let myself fall apart. I sank to the floor in the corner of the nursery, and I screamed. I screamed until my throat was raw, until I had no voice left, until the neighbors started pounding on the walls. I cried until there were no tears left, until I was just dry heaving, my body convulsing with grief. Then something happened. The tears stopped. The shaking stopped. And I felt something new, cold, clear, focused. Rachel wanted a war. She was going to get one. I did not sleep that night. I could not. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard Grace crying, that desperate newborn wail that I could not answer, could not soothe, could not make better. Instead, I did something I should have done weeks ago. I investigated. I pulled out my laptop and my legal pads and every skill I had learned in 6 years as a paralegal. I requested a copy of the CPS report, citing my right as the child's mother to review all documentation. I looked up the relevant laws, the procedures, the requirements for emergency removal. I made lists and timelines and notes. By morning, I had a plan. The CPS report arrived by email at 9 a.m., exactly 24 hours after they had taken Grace, just as the law required. I read it sitting at my kitchen table, my hands steady even though my heart was pounding. The report was damning. It painted a picture of a woman in crisis, a home in chaos, a baby in danger, But as I read more carefully, I started to see the cracks. The photographs were wrong. I had noticed it before, but now I documented it systematically. The window in the photos faced north. My window faced east. The flooring in the photos was hardwood. I had carpet. The outlet placement was different. The light fixtures were different. Someone had taken pictures of a completely different apartment and passed them off as mine. The timestamps were wrong too. The photos were supposedly taken on the morning of the removal, but the light suggested evening. And there, in the corner of one photo, was a detail that made my heart leap. A newspaper. Just the edge of it, barely visible on a counter that was supposedly mine. I zoomed in as far as I could, and I could just make out the date. The newspaper was from 2 weeks ago. These photos had not been taken the morning CPS came to my door. They had been staged days or weeks earlier, in a different apartment entirely, by someone who thought they were being clever, by someone who had underestimated me. I documented everything, every inconsistency, every impossible detail, every lie. I took photos of my own apartment with time-stamped newspapers prominently displayed, showing how different it looked from the supposedly damning evidence. Then I went to find Janelle Brooks. The CPS office was a gray government building downtown, the kind of place that smelled like old coffee and bureaucratic despair. I walked in looking nothing like the hysterical woman they had seen the day before. I had showered, put on professional clothes, done my makeup to hide the dark circles under my eyes. I looked like what I was, a paralegal with 6 years of experience and absolutely no intention of giving up. I need to speak with Janelle Brooks, I told the receptionist. It is regarding an active case. Do you have an appointment? No, but I have evidence that the case against me was based on fraudulent documentation, and I am certain Ms. Brooks would want to see it before she finds herself implicated in a federal offense. The receptionist's eyes widened. She picked up her phone. 5 minutes later, Janelle Brooks came out to meet me. Ms. Marshall. She did not look happy. You should be working with your assigned attorney, not confronting CPS workers directly. I cannot afford an attorney, and I do not need one. What I need is 5 minutes of your time and a willingness to look at what I found. The evidence has already been reviewed by the court. The evidence was fabricated, and I can prove it. She studied me for a long moment. Whatever she saw must have convinced her, because she sighed and gestured toward a small conference room. 5 minutes. I spread my documentation across the table, the side-by-side photographs, the analysis of the inconsistencies, the newspaper date proving the photos were staged. Look at this window, I said, pointing. In the photos you used, it faces north. In my apartment, the window faces east. Look at the flooring. I have carpet. These photos show hardwood. Look at this newspaper date. These photos were not taken the morning you came to my door. They were staged at least 2 weeks earlier. Janelle looked, really looked. I watched her face as she examined the evidence, saw the professional mask crack, saw doubt creep in. The light fixtures are different too, she murmured, almost to herself. I did not notice that before. Because you trusted the source. You trusted my sister, but Rachel lied. She manufactured this entire case to take my daughter away from me. Why would she do that? I do not know yet, but I am going to find out. Janelle was quiet for a long moment, studying the photographs. When she looked up, something had changed in her expression. If you are right about this, if someone really did fabricate evidence to remove a child, that is not just a procedural error, that is a federal crime. I know. You understand that I cannot just take your word for it. I need to verify this independently. I understand. That is why I am giving you copies of everything. All my documentation, all my analysis. Verify it yourself. Take it to your supervisors. Do whatever you need to do. But please, my voice cracked despite my best efforts. Please do not let them get away with this. I am not a bad mother. I love my daughter, and someone took her from me using lies. Janelle gathered the papers slowly, her face troubled. Give me 48 hours, she said finally. I need to look into this myself. If what you are saying is true, it is true. Then heads are going to roll, including mine, for not catching it sooner. She stood up, extending her hand. You are not what I expected, Ms. Marshall. I have seen a lot of parents in my career. A lot of them claim they are innocent. Most of them are not. But you? She shook my hand firmly. You might actually be telling the truth. I am. I promise you, I am. Go home. Get some rest if you can. I will be in touch. I walked out of that building feeling something I had not felt in days. Hope. 2 days later, Janelle called me back. You were right, she said without preamble. The photographs were fabricated. I traced them to a rental property in New Jersey. Someone staged the entire thing. I closed my eyes, relief washing over me in waves. I knew it. I knew they were lying. There is more. I pulled the original complaint, the one your sister filed. There are inconsistencies in her statement too, times that do not match up, details that contradict the evidence. Someone coached her on what to say, but they did not do a very good job. What happens now? I am recommending immediate reunification. There is a hearing scheduled for tomorrow morning. Given what I have found, I expect the judge will overturn the removal order. Tomorrow. I would have Grace back tomorrow. Thank you, I said, my voice breaking. Thank you so much. Do not thank me yet. We still need to figure out who is behind this. Your sister filed the complaint, but I do not think she acted alone. The fabricated photos, the staged apartment, the coordinated story. This took planning, resources. Someone helped her. I knew who had helped her. Marcus. Maybe others I did not know about yet. But that was a problem for after I got my daughter back. The hearing was at 9 a.m. in family court. I arrived at 8:30 wearing my best professional outfit, carrying a folder full of documentation. Janelle met me in the hallway, along with her supervisor, a stern-looking woman named Patricia, who looked like she had seen everything and believed nothing. The judge has reviewed the evidence of fabrication, Patricia said. She is prepared to rule in your favor. But Ms. Marshall, I want to be clear about something. This is not over. Someone committed serious crimes to take your daughter. We need to find out who and why. I understand. We are going to recommend that an investigation be opened. You should prepare yourself for things to get uglier before they get better. I nodded. I had been preparing for ugly my whole life. The hearing itself was almost anticlimactic. I sat at a table with Janelle while a judge reviewed the evidence, asked a few questions, and then ruled exactly as Janelle had predicted. Based on the evidence presented, this court finds that the emergency removal of the minor child was based on fraudulent documentation. The child is to be returned to her mother immediately. Furthermore, this court is ordering a full investigation into the source of the fabricated evidence. I cried then, not sad tears, relief tears, joy tears. The kind of tears that come when you have been holding your breath for days, and finally, you can exhale. Janelle put her hand on my shoulder. Let us go get your daughter. The foster home where Grace had been placed was a small house in the suburbs, clean and well-maintained, with toys in the yard and wind chimes on the porch. The foster mother, a kind-faced woman in her 60s, met us at the door. You must be Lena, she said. Grace is a beautiful baby. She has been asking for her mama. I knew that was not literally true. Grace was too young to ask for anything. But the sentiment made me cry all over again. They brought her to me in the living room. She was bigger than when I had last seen her, which should have been impossible after only 3 days, but felt absolutely true. When I took her in my arms, she grabbed my finger, the way she had when she was first born, like she was saying, "There you are. I have been waiting." I held her for a long time, just breathing in her baby smell, feeling her weight in my arms, letting myself believe that this was real, that I had won, that the nightmare was over. But of course, it was not over, not even close. I should have known that Rachel would not give up so easily. I should have known that taking Grace was only the first step in whatever plan she had been building. I should have known that the war was just beginning. But in that moment, holding my daughter, I let myself believe in victory. It was the last moment of peace I would have for a very long time. They came for me 3 days later. I was at Ethan's guest house by then. He had offered it to me after I got Grace back, when I told him I could not go back to the apartment I had shared with Marcus. "No strings," he had said. "No expectations. You just need a safe place to stay while you figure things out." I had accepted, because I was out of options and out of pride. The guest house was beautiful, a small cottage on his property with 2 bedrooms and a full kitchen and a view of gardens that probably cost more to maintain than I made in a year. Grace had her own room for the first time, painted a soft yellow that made me think of sunshine. For 3 days, I let myself breathe. Then the police arrived. They came at 6 in the morning, 3 cars with flashing lights, officers in bulletproof vests like they were expecting a shootout. They pounded on the door until I opened it, Grace in my arms, my heart already sinking. "Lena Marshall?" The officer in front held up a badge. "Yes?" "You are under arrest for fraud and theft. You have the right to remain silent." They handcuffed me in front of Ethan's mother, Diane, who had come to check on me when she heard the commotion. This sweet 67-year-old woman, who had been teaching me to make proper tea, watched as they led me away like a criminal. I managed to hand Grace to her before they put me in the car. "Call Ethan," I said. "Please, tell him what happened." Diane nodded, her face pale with shock, and then the car door closed and I was being driven away. At the police station, they explained the charges: fraud, theft, based on documents that showed I had stolen $50,000 from my adoptive parents' estate 5 years ago. Documents that were signed with my name. Documents that I had never seen before in my life. "This is not true," I said for the 100th time. "I never stole anything. I have not even spoken to my adoptive parents in 5 years. The documents say otherwise. The documents are forged, just like the photographs that were used to take my daughter. Someone is framing me." The detective looked at me with tired eyes. He had probably heard 1,000 criminals claim they were being framed. "You can explain that to the judge." And they put me in a holding cell. The walls were gray. The bench was hard. The toilet had no privacy screen. I sat there for hours, trying not to cry, trying to think, trying to figure out who had done this and why. The answer came to me slowly, piecing together fragments of conversations I had overheard, connections I had not understood. Rachel and Marcus had been planning this for years. The inheritance documents were the first step, created 5 years ago, to cut me off from the Carter family, to isolate me. Then Marcus, deliberately introduced to me at Rachel's party, positioned to get close, to learn my secrets, to be ready when the time came. Then, the pregnancy, maybe even planned to give them leverage. Then the CPS report, designed to take my daughter and destroy my credibility. And now this, fraud charges to put me in prison, to ensure I could never fight back, to make sure Rachel won once and for all. But why? What had I ever done to deserve this level of hatred? The answer came from an unexpected source. Ethan bailed me out the next morning. He was waiting when they released me, looking like he had not slept, his jaw tight with anger. "We need to talk," he said. "I found something." In his car, he handed me a folder. "I hired an investigator after the CPS thing. I wanted to understand what was happening, what I found." He shook his head. "Your sister's husband is a lawyer, right? Partner at Harper and Associates?" "Yes." "Why?" "Because Harper and Associates is currently under federal investigation for money laundering. They have been moving millions of dollars through fake legal settlements for years. And guess whose name is all over the paperwork?" I looked at the documents in the folder: financial records, bank transfers, corporate filings, and there, again and again, my signature, my name. "They have been using me," I said slowly, the pieces falling into place. "For years. They have been using my identity to commit crimes." "It looks that way. The inheritance theft charge? That money did not disappear. It went into an account with your name on it, an account you never opened, and then it got transferred to a shell company connected to Rachel's husband's firm. They set me up to take the fall. They have been setting you up for years. The foster care connection, no family, no resources. You were the perfect patsy. Someone no one would believe. Someone who could not fight back." I thought about all of it. The forged document that had cut me off from the Carters 5 years ago. Rachel's slow campaign of distance and cruelty. Marcus, introduced at just the right moment. The pregnancy, the CPS report, the fraud charges. It was all connected, all planned, all building toward this moment when they would finally destroy me. But they had made one mistake. They had underestimated me. "I need to find Marcus," I said. "He is the weak link. If I can get him to talk, to testify about what they have been doing." "Already done?" Ethan smiled grimly. "My investigator found him hiding in a motel outside the city. The gambling debts caught up with him. He is scared, Lena. Scared enough to flip." "Then let us go." The motel was exactly the kind of place you would expect someone to hide when their life was falling apart. Peeling paint, flickering neon, the smell of mildew and desperation. Marcus opened the door on the second knock, and I barely recognized him. He had lost weight. His eyes were red-rimmed and hollow. He looked like a man who had not slept in weeks. "Lena?" His voice cracked. "How did you find me?" "I am smarter than you ever gave me credit for. Can I come in?" The room was a disaster. Fast food wrappers everywhere, empty bottles, a gun on the nightstand that made my stomach drop. "Marcus, what is going on? What have you gotten yourself into?" "You do not understand." He sank onto the bed, his head in his hands. "They promised me it would be easy. Just get close to you. Keep an eye on you. Report back. They would take care of my debts. I would be free." "Who promised you?" "Rachel. And her husband. They said you were going to get in the way of something big. They said I just needed to keep you distracted until they were ready." "Ready for what?" "I do not know all of it. Something about the firm. Money. They needed someone to blame if things went wrong. They needed—" He looked up at me, and I saw tears in his eyes. "They needed you, Lena. You were always the plan. The fall guy. The person who would take the blame for everything they did. And you helped them. You let them take our daughter. You let them frame me for fraud. I did not have a choice. They owned me. The gambling debts, Lena. I owed $40,000 to people who do not forgive debts. Rachel's husband paid it off. But that meant I belonged to them. Everything I did, everything I said to you, it was all part of their plan. I should have felt sympathy. Part of me did. Marcus was weak and stupid and selfish. But he was also trapped. Caught in a web he did not know how to escape. But a larger part of me felt only cold determination. "You're going to help me," I said. "You're going to testify about everything, the plan, the payments, the forged documents, all of it." "I cannot. They will kill me. They will destroy you either way. At least this way, you have a chance. Witness protection. A new identity. A life without debts and threats hanging over your head. You would do that? After everything I did to you? I would do that for Grace. For my daughter. The one you helped them try to take from me." I leaned in close. "You owe us, Marcus. You owe us everything. And this is how you start to pay it back." He stared at me for a long moment. Then he nodded. "What do you need me to do?" Marcus talked for 3 hours. Names, dates, bank accounts, meeting locations, everything he knew about Rachel's plan and her husband's criminal enterprise. I recorded every word. Then I took the recording to Detective Sarah Mitchell, the investigator who had been assigned to my fraud case. "I know you think I am guilty," I said, sliding the recorder across her desk. "But before you make up your mind, I need you to listen to this." She listened. Her face went from skeptical to interested to openly shocked. "If this is true," she said when it was finished, "it is true, and I can prove more. Bank records showing money moving through accounts in my name that I never opened. Forged documents with signatures that do not match my real handwriting. A pattern of fraud going back years, all pointing to Harper and Associates. You understand that I cannot just take your word for it. This needs to be verified. Then verify it. But while you are doing that, consider this. Rachel Carter Hayes and her husband are the ones who should be in handcuffs, not me. I am just the convenient scapegoat they have been setting up for 5 years." Detective Mitchell looked at the recorder in her hand, looked at the documents I had spread across her desk, looked at me. "I will make some calls," she said finally. "Do not leave town." I did not leave town. I went back to Ethan's guest house and I held my daughter, and I waited. The calls came 2 days later. Rachel and her husband had been arrested. The FBI had raided Harper and Associates, seizing computers and files and years' worth of evidence. Multiple partners at the firm were being charged with money laundering, fraud, and conspiracy. And the charges against me were being dropped. I cried when Detective Mitchell told me. Not sad tears, not relief tears. Something in between, something that felt like years of weight finally lifting off my shoulders. "We found everything," the detective said. "The shell companies, the fake accounts, the forged signatures. You were right. They were using you as a fall guy, setting you up to take the blame for millions of dollars in criminal activity. What about Rachel? She is being charged with conspiracy to commit fraud, filing a false CPS report, and obstruction of justice. Her husband is looking at 20 to 30 years. 20 to 30 years. The number felt unreal. And Marcus? He is cooperating. We have placed him in protective custody pending trial. He will have to testify, but given the circumstances, the DA is willing to recommend leniency. I nodded. I did not care about Marcus anymore. I did not care about Rachel or her husband or the complicated web of crimes they had been weaving for years. I just cared about Grace, about the future, about building something new from the ashes of everything they had tried to destroy. But Rachel had one more card to play. She made bail. I do not know how, given the severity of the charges, but somehow Rachel convinced a judge to let her out pending trial. She had to surrender her passport. She had to wear an ankle monitor, but she was free for about 12 hours. In those 12 hours, Rachel executed her final act of revenge. I found out when my phone started exploding with notifications in the middle of the night, text messages from numbers I did not recognize, social media tags from accounts I had never heard of, email after email after email. Rachel had released everything. My foster care records, which were supposed to be sealed by law. My medical history from when I was a teenager, struggling with depression after my parents died. Every embarrassing photo she could find. Every vulnerable moment I had ever shared with her in confidence. Every secret I had ever trusted her with. She had sent it all to every news outlet, every gossip site, every social media platform she could find. By morning, my entire life was public entertainment. The headlines were brutal. Billionaire's girlfriend has secret past of mental illness, troubled foster child turned gold digger, the woman who tried to frame her own sister. Yes, Rachel had flipped the narrative. In her version of events, I was the criminal. I was the one who had framed her. I was the crazy, unstable woman who had seduced a billionaire and destroyed her sister's life out of jealousy. And people believed it. The comments were worse than the headlines. Strangers dissecting my trauma for entertainment. Armchair psychologists diagnosing me based on medical records they had no right to see. People calling me a fraud, a liar, a gold digger, a psycho. Ethan found me sitting in his living room at 3 a.m., scrolling through the hatred, unable to stop. Lena. He sat down beside me, gently taking the phone from my hands. You need to stop. They hate me. Everyone hates me. Not everyone. Not the people who matter. She won. My voice was hollow. Even from jail, Rachel won. She took everything. My privacy, my dignity, my story. There is nothing left. Ethan was quiet for a moment. Then he said something that changed everything. Is there? Or is there everything? I looked at him, confused. Rachel tried to control your narrative by hiding it, by threatening you with exposure. But now everything is out there. Every secret, every struggle, every vulnerable moment. She cannot threaten you with it anymore. She cannot use it against you. It is just there, public. Done. Svetum. That is supposed to make me feel better? It is supposed to make you realize that you have a choice. You can let her define your story, or you can define it yourself. I thought about that. About all the years I had spent hiding my past, hiding my struggles, hiding who I really was. And I realized he was right. Rachel had meant to destroy me with exposure, but maybe she had actually set me free. I called a journalist the next morning, not a gossip writer, a real investigative reporter named Patricia Sawyer, who had covered the Harper and Associates scandal for the Tribune. I want to tell my story, I said. All of it. My own words, my own terms. Everyone wants to tell their story right now. Yours is pretty radioactive. I know, but I also know the truth, and I think people deserve to hear it. There was a pause. Then Patricia said, I will give you 1 hour. Make it count. The interview aired 3 days later. 2 hours of conversation condensed into a 15-minute segment that somehow captured everything. I talked about growing up, about losing my parents, about foster care, and the feeling of being unwanted, unloved, disposable. I talked about finding a family in the Carters and then losing them to Rachel's manipulation. I talked about Marcus and the pregnancy and the terror of having my daughter taken away. And I talked about surviving. I am not perfect, I said, looking directly into the camera. I have struggled with depression. I grew up in foster care. I made bad choices in relationships. I trusted people who did not deserve it. I am also a fighter, a mother, and a survivor. My sister wanted you to see my darkness, but darkness is just the space where light has not reached yet. So here is my light. I am still standing. The response was overwhelming. Within hours, the narrative started shifting. People were sharing my interview, sharing their own stories of family betrayal and foster care and mental health struggles. The hashtag, "She is still standing," started trending. I was not a villain anymore. I was a symbol, and Rachel, watching from wherever she was hiding, had to know that she had lost. They found her at the Canadian border 3 days later, trying to flee the country with a suitcase full of cash. She was arrested without incident and transported back to face trial. I asked to see her before they took her away. The visit was brief, supervised. Rachel sat across from me in an orange jumpsuit, her hair unwashed, her face bare of makeup. She looked smaller somehow, diminished. "I needed to see you one more time," I said. "To gloat? To tell you I forgive you." Her face twisted with disbelief. "I do not want your forgiveness. I know. That is why I am giving it. Not for you, for me. You have controlled enough of my life, Rachel, my past, my relationships, my reputation. I am taking back the last piece, the part where I get to decide what I carry with me and what I leave behind. You are weak. You have always been weak. No, Rachel. I survived foster care. I survived you. I survived losing my daughter and getting her back. I survived having my entire life exposed to the world. I am not weak. I am just done letting your hatred define me. I will never stop hating you. I know. And I feel sorry for you, because while you are sitting in a cell replaying everything you have lost, I am going to be living. Actually living. Not hiding, not apologizing, not pretending to be something I am not. And that will hurt you more than anything I could ever say. I stood up and turned toward the door. "Lena," Rachel's voice stopped me. "Why? Why do you get to win? You were the charity case, the broken little orphan they felt sorry for. I was their real daughter. I should have had everything." I looked back at her one last time. "You had everything, Rachel. A family who loved you. Parents who never left. A home that was always yours. You had everything, and you threw it away because you could not stand the idea of sharing. That is not my fault. That was always your choice." I walked away. She screamed something after me, but I did not turn around. The door closed between us, and it was over. Finally. Truly over. 6 months later. I have a new apartment now. Nothing fancy, just a small 2-bedroom place in a quiet neighborhood with good schools. The walls are painted soft yellow, the color I always wanted. There are family photos on the shelves, but not the old kind. New photos. Photos of the family I have chosen, not the one I was born into or adopted by. Grace is walking now, 13 months old and already trying to run, her chubby legs carrying her from room to room while I chase behind, equal parts terrified and delighted. She has my eyes and my stubborn streak, and she laughs at everything. This bubbling, joyful sound that makes my whole heart expand. She does not know anything about what happened. She does not know about the sidewalk, or the CPS visit, or the jail cell. She does not know that her mother almost lost everything. All she knows is that she is loved, unconditionally and completely, and that is exactly how it should be. I work as a victim's advocate now, 3 days a week at a nonprofit that helps mothers navigate the nightmare of false CPS reports and custody battles. I know the system from both sides. I know how to fight it. I know what it feels like to be alone and terrified and wondering if anyone will ever believe you. I cannot fix everything. I cannot save everyone. But I can hold space for their pain and point them toward resources and tell them the most important thing. You are not alone. You can survive this. It does not feel like it now, but you can. Ethan and I are together, officially, publicly, in a way that still surprises me sometimes. Not because he is rich, though that took getting used to. Because he is good, genuinely, quietly good in a way that I did not believe it existed until I met him. He does not try to fix my problems or rescue me from my struggles. He just shows up, makes me coffee in the morning, exactly how I like it, plays with Grace until she shrieks with laughter, listens when I need to talk, and sits quietly when I do not. That is what love actually looks like after trauma, I have learned. Not grand gestures, not dramatic rescues, just someone remembering how you take your coffee, being present without demanding anything, showing up day after day in all the small ways that add up to everything. Diane, Ethan's mother, has become something like a grandmother to Grace. She drops by with homemade cookies and unsolicited advice and stories about Ethan as a baby that make him groan with embarrassment. She calls me dear in a way that makes me feel like I belong. I did not know what belonging felt like until I found these people, until I built this family from scratch, from choice, from the ashes of everything that burned. The trials are over. Rachel got 15 years. Her husband got 25. Marcus got 3 years, reduced for cooperation, though I heard he was released early to a halfway house somewhere out west. I do not think about him much. He is part of a past I have chosen to leave behind. Sometimes, late at night, when Grace is sleeping and the apartment is quiet, I think about that woman on the sidewalk, the one who sat on cold concrete in a thin blue dress, watching expensive shoes walk past, wondering if anyone would ever stop. She is still part of me. She always will be, but she is not alone anymore. I learned something, going through all of this. Something I wish someone had told me when I was 8 years old, newly orphaned, terrified, convinced that the worst was still coming. The truth is only a weapon when you are afraid of it. For years, I hid my past, my struggles, my pain. I thought if people knew about the foster homes and the depression and all the broken pieces of my story, they would judge me, reject me, see me as damaged goods. But Rachel exposed everything, and the world did not end. In fact, something unexpected happened. People saw my darkness and they responded with their own. They shared their stories, their struggles, their survival. And somehow, impossibly, I found connection in the very thing I thought would isolate me. If you are in the middle of your own nightmare right now, I want you to know something. The ending is not written yet. When I was on that sidewalk, in labor, alone, abandoned by the person who was supposed to love me, I thought that was my story. Broken woman, tragic ending, nothing but pain stretching out forever. But that was just the opening scene. You do not know what chapter you are in. You cannot see how the threads will weave together, how the darkness will give way to light, how the people who destroy you will become the reason you discover your own strength. So, keep reading, keep fighting, keep demanding better. Because sometimes the person you least expect, including yourself, is the one who rewrites everything. I'm sitting on my small balcony now, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. Grace is sleeping inside, that deep, peaceful sleep of children who feel safe. Somewhere in the kitchen, Ethan is attempting to make dinner, and based on the smoke alarm that just went off, it is not going well. I laugh. It feels good to laugh. That woman on the sidewalk, the one who begged a stranger for help, she is not gone. She is still part of me, will always be part of me. She is the proof that I can survive anything, that I can fall apart completely and still find a way to put myself back together. But she is not alone anymore, and neither are you. Now, if stories like this speak to your heart, I have a small favor to ask. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a story that might change your perspective. Drop a comment below and tell me, have you ever been betrayed by someone you trusted completely. I read every single comment, and your stories inspire the content I create. If this story touches you, share it with a friend who needs to hear it today. Sometimes a single story can remind someone that they are not alone. And if you are still here, at the end, leave a like to let me know you made it through. It helps more than you know. Before you go, I want you to remember one thing. Lena was not saved by a billionaire. She was not rescued by a man. She saved herself. She fought back with evidence, with intelligence, with the refusal to stay silent. That is the real lesson here. You are stronger than you know. And sometimes, the person who rewrites your story is you. Thank you for staying until the end. If this story moved you, if it reminded you of your own strength, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. And remember, you are not alone. You never were. Now, let us begin. Transition to story. They say God does not give you more than you can handle. Standing on that sidewalk, contractions ripping through my body, watching person after person step around me like I was garbage. I thought maybe God had confused me with someone stronger. This content was carefully researched, developed, and manually edited by our team to bring you meaningful stories with valuable life lessons. Every word was crafted with intention. Every lesson was chosen with care, because you deserve content that matters.